Some houses hold more than furniture and memories. Some walls breathe ancient secrets. Corridors echo with footsteps never taken. Windows witness encounters that should never have happened. The Valenza mansion, perched on the hillside of Stone Ridge, was one such structure, imposing, solitary, shrouded in mist and silence. And it was there, amidst the scent of old wood and the faint perfume of lavender, that two wounded hearts found each other, unaware they were searching. Helena was just a cleaner, invisible, discreet, someone who moved through rooms like a gentle shadow, tidying what others messed up, cleaning what no one else saw. She didn't ask questions. She didn't expect answers. She simply did her work with an almost reverent care, as if every object in that house deserved attention, respect, delicacy. Perhaps because she herself needed to be treated that way. Arthur Valenza, on the other hand, was the owner of it all, a millionaire, a recluse, a man who had returned to town after years of absence, carrying the weight of an unspoken grief on his shoulders. He lived locked away in that mansion like someone hiding from himself, and perhaps he was. But on a grey morning, when the mountains awoke cloaked in cold and fog, fate decided it was time to bring them together. Helena went up to clean the upper balcony and found him there, fallen, unconscious, his pale skin stark against the cold marble floor. Her heart leapt, her hands trembled, and when she touched his wrist, she felt something inexplicable, a tremor that had no name, as if that half-open life touched hers in a dangerous, familiar way. When Arthur awoke, confused and vulnerable, he said nothing. He merely held her wrist for a second longer than he should have, and in that brief touch, something broke, something intertwined, something began. This is the story of two destinies that crossed paths in a house full of secrets, of two wounded souls who found refuge in each other, of a love born of silence and grown in pain, of a hidden truth that could destroy everything or save what remained of them. Because in the end, some stories don't start with a kiss. They start with a feint, a touch, a secret that refuses to stay buried. Subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. Helena climbed the stairs of the Valenza mansion with her bucket in hand and her heart as heavy as ever. It was 7 in the morning, and the fog still hugged the mountains, creeping through the cracks of the old windows like cold fingers searching for something lost. She liked that hour. The house was silent. No one saw her. No one bothered her. It was as if for a few hours she could exist without being judged, without being reminded of all she had lost. Reaching the upper balcony, she stopped. Something was different. The glass door was ajar, letting in the icy wind. And there, sprawled on the cold marble, was he, Arthur Valenza, the man who lived alone in that immense mansion, the reclusive millionaire whom everyone in town spoke of in hushed tones, as if uttering his name might summon ghosts. Helena sometimes saw him from a distance, always distant, always quiet, always with that expression of someone carrying the whole world on his shoulders. But now he was on the floor, pale, motionless. She dropped the bucket and ran to him, kneeling beside him. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from her chest. With trembling hands, she touched his wrist. It was cold, but there was a pulse. Weak, irregular, but it was there. "Mr. Valenza," she called, her voice faltering. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket and dialed emergency services, but the call wouldn't connect. The mountains. The darn mountains always blocked the signal. So she did the only thing she could. She grabbed the jacket lying on a nearby chair and covered his body, trying to warm him. She ran her hand over his cold forehead, brushed away the dark strands of hair falling over his closed eyes. And it was in that instant that something strange happened. She felt it. She couldn't say what. She couldn't name it. But it was as if, by touching this stranger, a part of her recognized something in him, as if her fingers knew a story her mind was unaware of. Before continuing, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to receive inspiring stories every day. Minutes later, Arthur groaned softly and opened his eyes slowly. Confusion clouded his face as he saw her there, so close, looking at him with a mixture of fear and concern. "What?" His voice rasped, weak. "What happened?" "You fainted," Helena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I couldn't call an ambulance. The signal." He tried to get up, but she placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Wait, you're still weak." Arthur looked at her then, truly looked. And Helena felt the weight of that gaze like never before. It wasn't a look of boss to employee. It wasn't an empty look. It was a look of someone seeing, of someone who saw. "Who are you?" he asked softly. "Helena. I clean the house." He frowned as if trying to remember. "Helena," he repeated, and the name sounded different in his voice. Softer, more real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cold wind continued to swirl in through the open door, but between them there was something warm, something dangerous, something that shouldn't exist. Then Arthur took her wrist. Not tightly, just enough for her to feel it. "Thank you," he said, and there was something broken in his voice, something that made Helena's heart ache. She just nodded, unable to form words. When she finally helped him to his feet and guided him to the living room sofa, Helena realized her hands were still trembling, not from fear, not from the cold, but from something she couldn't name, something that scared her more than anything else. Because for the first time in years, she had felt that she wasn't alone in the world. And that was dangerous. Very dangerous. As she prepared a hot cup of tea in the kitchen, Helena looked out the window at the fog-shrouded mountains. The same mountains that had witnessed her pain. The same ones that now seemed to whisper that something was about to change. She didn't yet know that the man who had fallen on the floor held secrets that intertwined with hers. She didn't know that his past touched hers in ways she couldn't imagine. She didn't know that by saving him, she might have condemned her own heart. But fate never asks permission. It simply happens. And on that cold, foggy morning, it happened. The following days were strange. Arthur didn't faint again, but he also didn't disappear again. For the first time since Helena had started working at the mansion, he was present, not in an invasive way, but like a constant shadow that followed her through the halls without ever getting too close. She saw him in the library, flipping through books he didn't seem to read. She saw him on the porch, looking out at the mountains like someone searching for something they'd never find. She saw him in the dining room, sitting alone at a table too large for one person, and he saw her too. Helena felt the weight of his gaze when she passed by with a cleaning cloth in her hands. She felt it when he stopped what he was doing just to watch her arrange the sofa cushions or water the plants by the entrance. It wasn't an uncomfortable stare. It was curious, almost tender, but she didn't know how to handle it. Helena had always been invisible. It was as if she had built her life around this invisibility, using it as a shield against the world. After her sister's death 3 years earlier, she had learned that it was easier not to be seen, not to be remembered, not to be touched, because to be touched meant to feel, and to feel meant to hurt. But Arthur wouldn't let her be invisible. One rainy afternoon, as she was dusting the library shelves, he entered the room carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might want some," he said, extending one of the mugs. Helena looked at the drink, surprised. "Thank you, Mr. Valenza." "Arthur," he corrected with a half-smile. "You can call me Arthur." She nodded, not knowing what to say. She took the mug and took a sip, feeling the warmth go down her throat. It was chamomile tea, her favorite. How did he know? "Do you live far from here?" Arthur asked, leaning against the bookshelf. "Not too far, about 20 minutes by bus." "Alone?" She hesitated. "Yes." He nodded, as if understanding something she hadn't said. "Me too," he said softly. "I live alone. Always have, really. Even when there were other people here." Helena looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw beyond the distant millionaire facade. She saw a tired man, sad, lost. "Why did you come back to Stone Creek?" she asked, before she could stop herself. Arthur took a moment to answer. He looked out the window, where the rain was falling gently on the mountains. "Because I needed to face something," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Something I left behind a long time ago." Helena didn't ask what. She didn't need to. She knew that tone of voice. She knew that look. It was the same one she saw in the mirror every morning. "And you?" Arthur asked, turning to her. "Why did you come to work here?" She clutched the mug in her hands. "Because I needed a fresh start. I needed a place where no one knew me, where no one would ask me about." She stopped, swallowed hard. "About the past." Arthur nodded slowly. "I understand." And Helena believed he truly understood. It was at this moment that something shifted between them. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious, but it was real. Because sometimes connection isn't born from grand gestures. It's born from shared silences, from offered teas, from looks that say more than 1,000 words. And on that rainy afternoon, as the storm washed over the mountains outside, something inside them began to thaw. Something they had both buried deep, believing it would never come back to life. But the heart has its own rules, and sometimes it decides it's time to beat again. Life in the mansion took on a new rhythm. Helena continued her work with the same care as always, but now there was something different in the air. A soft, almost imperceptible tension that hung in the corridors, like the scent of lavender she left in her wake. Arthur began leaving small signs of his presence. A book on the kitchen table with a page marked. A still warm coffee cup next to the vase of flowers she watered every morning. Short notes written in a firm hand. "Thank you for taking care of the house. And of me." Helena kept each of these notes in a shoebox under her bed. She didn't know why. She just knew she had to. But the world around them wasn't kind to unlikely connections. One morning, when Helena arrived for work, she found an elegant woman sitting in the living room. Impeccably styled blonde hair, expensive clothes, and erect posture. She looked at Helena with a gaze that clearly said, "You don't belong here." "You must be the new housekeeper," the woman said without getting up. "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Clarice Valenza. I'm Arthur's cousin." Helena nodded, feeling a tightness in her chest without knowing why. "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Valenza." Clarice studied her for a long moment, as if assessing every detail. "Arthur's been different since he returned," she said, in a tone that mixed concern and suspicion. "I don't know if it's for better or worse, but I hope you know how to keep things professional." The message was clear, and it hurt. Helena just nodded and withdrew, her legs feeling shaky as she climbed the stairs. That afternoon, Arthur found her on the porch. "Sorry about Clarice," he said without preamble. "She thinks she needs to protect the family from, well, from everything." "You don't need to apologize, she's right." Arthur frowned. "Right about what?" Helena didn't answer. She just continued cleaning the porch railing, avoiding his gaze. "Helena." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "Look at me." Slowly, she did, and what she saw in those dark eyes disarmed her completely. "Do you think I care what Clarice thinks?" Arthur asked, taking a step towards her. "Do you think I care what anyone thinks?" "You should." "I'm just—" "Don't say that," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't say you're just anything. You're not." Helena's heart hammered so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered. Arthur took another step. Now they were so close she could feel his warmth, the scent of coffee and wood that accompanied him. "I don't know either," he admitted, his voice low, vulnerable. "But I know that for the first time in years, I wake up and don't feel dead inside. And that started the day you found me collapsed on that porch." Helena felt tears sting her eyes. "Arthur, you don't have to say anything now," he said, taking a step back. "Just don't disappear." And with that, he left, leaving her alone with the cold mountain wind and a heart in pieces. Because she knew she was starting to feel something she shouldn't, something that could destroy them both, something she could no longer control. That night, lying in her small bed, Helena stared at the ceiling and allowed herself, for the first time in years, to imagine the touch of a hand, to imagine a kiss, to imagine a different life. But reality always returns. And with it, the secrets they both hid, secrets that soon would come to light in a devastating way. It was on a full moon night that everything changed. Helena had stayed late, finishing the library's tidying. Arthur had insisted she have dinner before leaving, and she'd agreed, too tired to argue. They ate in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need to fill every second with words. When they finished, Arthur walked her to the door. The night was clear, the moon illuminating the rolling hills with a silver light that made everything seem surreal. "It's beautiful here at night," Helena said, pausing on the porch. "It is," Arthur agreed, standing beside her. "But it's also lonely." She looked at him. "You don't have to be alone." "I chose to be," he replied with a sad smile. "Or at least I thought I chose to be." Helena felt her chest tighten. And now, Arthur turned to her, and there was something different in his eyes. Something intense, something that made her forget to breathe. "Now I'm not so sure." He took a step toward her, another, and another, until he was so close she could count every eyelash, every line around those eyes that looked at her as if she were the only real thing in the world. "Helena," he whispered, and her name had never sounded so beautiful. "Arthur, But he didn't let her finish. He raised his hand and touched her face, so gently she almost crumbled right there. "I have no right to feel this," he said, his voice rough. "I have no right to want you, but I do. God, how I do." Tears streamed down Helena's face before she could stop them. "Me too," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But I can't." Why? Because she was afraid of giving herself over and being left again, afraid of loving and losing, afraid of discovering it was all just a dream that would end the moment the sun rose. But before she could answer, Arthur leaned in and rested his forehead against hers. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "I promise." And Helena believed him. In that moment, under the moonlight, she believed. Their lips met slowly, hesitantly, as if both were testing if this was real. And when they realized it was, the kiss deepened, charged with all the loneliness, all the pain, all the suppressed desire they both carried. It was a kiss that said everything words couldn't. When they pulled away, they were both trembling. "Helena, I need to go," she said, pulling back. "I need to." But he held her hand. "Stay." And she almost did. Almost, but the fear was stronger, so she pulled away, whispered an almost inaudible "sorry," and ran out the entrance, leaving Arthur alone under the moon, her taste still on his lips and his heart more broken than ever, because he knew there was something she wasn't saying, something that could destroy everything. And he was right. Helena didn't return to the mansion the next day, nor the one after. She called saying she was sick, but they both knew it was a lie. Arthur waited. He tried calling, but she didn't answer. He tried sending messages, but she didn't reply. It was Clarice who brought the truth to light. On a rainy afternoon, she appeared at the mansion with an old box full of papers, photographs, and letters. "I thought you should see this," she said, placing the box on the table. "It's Isabella's stuff." Arthur froze at the name. Isabella, the woman he had loved, the woman who had died because of him. With trembling hands, he opened the box and found the letters he had written to her but never sent. Letters full of love, regret, and pain. And then he saw the photograph, an old photograph from a birthday. Isabella was in the center, smiling, surrounded by friends and family. And there, in the background, almost imperceptible, was a girl about 15 years old, a girl with dark hair and sad eyes, a girl he recognized immediately. Helena. His heart stopped. Clarice. Who is this girl? The cousin looked at the photo and frowned. I don't know. But if she's in this picture, she must have been a friend or relative of Isabella's. Arthur felt the world crumble. Helena knew Isabella. Somehow, their lives had crossed paths even before they met. And she never said anything. Anger, confusion, pain, it all mixed into a whirlwind he couldn't control. He grabbed his car and drove to Helena's house. He banged on the door hard, the rain soaking his clothes. She opened it, surprised, her eyes wide at seeing him there. "Arthur, you knew Isabella," he said, his voice hard. It wasn't a question. Helena's face paled. You knew who I was from the start. You knew what happened, and you didn't say anything." Tears streamed down her face. "Isabella was my sister," she whispered. The world stopped. "What? She was my older sister, and she died in a car accident and are coming to find you." Arthur stumbled back, as if he'd been punched. "Helena, I didn't know you were here," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know the Arthur Valenza from my sister's stories was the same man I'd find collapsed on that porch. But when I found out, I couldn't tell you, because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of hating you," she whispered. "Of hating myself for not being able to hate you." Arthur felt tears sting his eyes. "I killed your sister." "No," Helena said, taking a step towards him. "You didn't kill her. It was an accident. I know that. I always knew. But I never forgave myself." "I haven't forgiven myself either," she confessed, "for not stopping her from leaving that night, for not being there, for surviving when she didn't." They looked at each other, two broken hearts trying to find meaning in the pain. "What do we do now?" Arthur asked, his voice weak. Helena shook her head. "I don't know." And there, under the relentless rain, they drifted apart, each carrying the weight of an impossible truth, each believing that love wouldn't be enough to heal such deep wounds. But fate wasn't done with them yet. The weeks that followed were the hardest Helena had ever lived. She stopped working at the mansion. She sent a resignation by text and blocked Arthur's number, but she couldn't forget. The kiss, the touch, the way he looked at her, the way her heart still pounded erratically just thinking about him. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, she found an old box stored in the closet. It belonged to Isabella, things Helena had never had the courage to open. Now she opened it. Inside, there were letters, photos, mementos of a life that no longer existed. And then she found the diary. With trembling hands, Helena opened it and began to read. And what she found changed everything. Isabella had written about Arthur, about how she loved him, about how he made her happy. But she had also written about her fear. The fear of not being enough, the fear of losing him. And in the last entry, written the night of the accident, there was a confession Helena never imagined. "Today, I'm going to tell Arthur about the pregnancy. I'm scared, but I'm also happy. Maybe this will change everything. Maybe we can finally be a family." Helena dropped the journal, her heart pounding. Isabella was pregnant, and Arthur never knew. Tears streamed down her face as she understood everything. His pain, the guilt, the weight he carried. He never knew he was going to be a father. He never knew Isabella was on her way to tell him the best news of their lives. And he never knew that in dying she had taken with her not just her own future, but the future of both of them. Helena had to tell him, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. He deserved to know. That same night she went to the mansion. The door was ajar. She entered slowly and found him in the library, sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames with vacant eyes. "Arthur." He turned, surprised. "Helena." She approached, the journal in her hands. "There's something you need to know." And then she told him everything. When she finished, Arthur was on his knees, his face in his hands, sobbing heartbrokenly. "I was going to be a dad," he whispered. "I was going to be a dad, and I never knew." Helena knelt beside him and hugged him, and for the first time in years, they both cried together. They cried for Isabella. They cried for the baby who was never born. They cried for all they had lost, and they also cried for all they could still have, because in that moment they understood something essential. The pain wasn't separating them. The pain was uniting them. And maybe together they could learn to carry this weight. Maybe together they could learn to live again. The days that followed were different. Arthur and Helena didn't pretend everything was okay. They didn't try to rush anything. They just allowed each other's presence to be enough. They talked about Isabella, about the pain, about what could have been and what still could be. And slowly, very slowly, the wound began to heal. One sunny afternoon, Arthur took Helena to the top of the ridge. "Isabella loved this place," he said, looking at the horizon. "She used to say that from here she could see the whole world." Helena smiled. "She was always a dreamer, just like you." She looked at him surprised. "I'm not a dreamer." "Yes, you are," Arthur said, turning to her. "You just forgot to dream for a while, but I see it. I see it in your eyes, in the way you take care of things, in the way you look at me." Helena felt tears sting her eyes. "Arthur." He took a step toward her and took her hands. "I know it's complicated. I know there's pain involved. But I also know that when I'm with you, for the first time in years, I feel alive. And I don't want to let that go. I don't want to let you go." "Me neither," she whispered. "Then don't." And he kissed her. It was a different kiss than the first. There was no hesitation, no fear. It was a kiss that said, "I choose you. I choose us." When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Isabella would have liked to know we found each other," Helena said softly. "I think she knew," Arthur replied. "I think she always knew." And in that moment, under the mountain sun, they made a silent promise. To honor Isabella's memory by living fully, to carry the pain but also the joy, to build something new on the ruins of the past, because love doesn't erase pain, but it teaches us to live with it, and sometimes that's all we need. 6 months later, the Valenza mansion was different. The windows were open, letting in the fresh mountain air. There were flowers on the tables, soft music playing throughout the house, and laughter. For the first time in years, there was laughter. Helena lived there now, not as a housekeeper, but as the mistress of the home, as much as Arthur. They planted a garden together in the spot where Arthur used to stand alone, staring into the void. They called it Isabella's Garden, a place of memory, but also of life. And on a clear morning, as they watered the flowers, Arthur stopped and looked at Helena with that gentle smile she had grown to love. "Are you happy?" he asked. Helena thought for a moment. "Yes," she replied with certainty. "I am." "Me too." He pulled her into a hug, and there under the morning sun, They simply existed, two hearts that had found in each other the healing they so desperately sought. The pain was still there. It always would be. Isabella would always be a part of them, as would the child who was never born. But now, instead of sorrow, these memories brought gratitude. Gratitude for having found each other. Gratitude for choosing to move forward. Gratitude for choosing to love. Because in the end, love isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering and still choosing to live. It's about carrying the past without letting it paralyze you. It's about finding someone who understands your pain and still chooses to stay. And that's how two broken hearts discovered that love, when it's true, always finds a way. And you, what did you think of this story? What was the moment that touched your heart the most? Leave your comments below and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. That way you never miss our love stories.